Yes, welcome in. The Badgers, big-time winners, beating Purdue 52-6 on Saturday. A much-needed win, and they did it in a number of different ways. Defense played well. Offense played well. Special teams, Atticus Bertram, still just an absolute magician with knocking punts off of guys. Just incredible. We're going to get to all of it. Jesse, this feels a little bit different than the last few weeks have felt. Actually, you know what? Probably the biggest difference since maybe Minnesota last year.
It certainly does feel different. And this is the type of performance I think a lot of people have been waiting on. It was the most complete game that a Wisconsin team has had under Luke Fickell. And I fully acknowledge that this is coming against a horrible Purdue team. And in fact, Purdue's coach Ryan Walters said after the game that they were a bad football team, which is never a good sign for your program when your head coach is acknowledging that publicly. On the other hand, Wisconsin has played teams that have not been particularly good, and they have not done this lately. So this really felt like old school Wisconsin football. Obviously, the Badgers are doing it in a different way. But when you came to see Wisconsin whoop on a bad team, they generally used to do it, and they did it. So it was a really good day all the way around, and Badgers fans had a fun Saturday.
Yeah, it was probably the most fun Saturday they've had this year. Actually, I'm not even – that's a guarantee. It was the most fun Saturday they had. In terms of the football, I don't know everything else around it. People have different plans on different days, but Wisconsin got it done in emphatic fashion, and we'll get into all of it coming up with what went right, some of the stuff that didn't go so right as well, and we'll get into your Twitter questions, your X questions, or wherever you sent those questions to me. Before we do, it is Home Field Apparel. They are the official apparel sponsor of the camp. They have the best vintage gear you can possibly find in college athletics, and they just keep on releasing new stuff. They just released a brand new coach's jacket, a little lightweight jacket that's probably going to be perfect for the next time the Badgers play a home game. And so go check it out, homefieldapparel.com. Use the promo code Bucky24 for 15% off your purchase. All right. So, yeah, we'll go with what went right here to begin. Usually we do like whichever one was worse, but there's just way too much positives to talk about that I don't want to be negative to start this one. So, and there's not a ton of negatives to talk about, to be honest. This is going to be probably the shortest negative section we do, but let's start with what went right in week 6 for the Badgers.
This ought to be our longest what went right segment of the season. So we've got a lot of good things to talk about with Wisconsin. Let's start offensively and start with Braden Locke. Obviously, he had 2 early interceptions, but what he was able to do to respond from that was exceptional. The second half that he put together is the best half of football he's had as a college player. And I know a lot of people, I think us included, were wondering, like, what is his ceiling here? He had, as I said before, this uncanny ability to just complete 50% of his passes, and he needed to do more than that in order to elevate this team. And boy, did he deliver. Obviously had 2 50-plus yard touchdown passes, which had not been done by a Wisconsin team in a game since Gary Anderson's first game against UMass in 2013. And he's finishing with the 7th most passing yards in a single game. So he did a lot of really good things, and I think this showed that he can be more than what people have seen before. We can go down position by position, but I think when you have a quarterback throwing for 359 yards, this is pretty darn good.
359 and 3 touchdowns, and obviously you mentioned those 2 interceptions. I think look, Braden Locke played great in that second half. There was a stretch there, I think, where he completed 9 or 10 straight passes, and there were a bunch of different guys catching passes too, right? We saw Vinny Anthony get in on it. We saw, obviously, Trech Kekahuna get in on it. We saw C.J. Williams get in on it. The guys that maybe we haven't heard a ton of Vinny, last week, but a lot of this year it's been Will Pauling and Bryson Green. And obviously, both those 2 guys go down, and he was able to have other guys step up around him. And I thought, again, Braden Locke, ton of credit. He probably could have built a house a couple times in that backfield, the way that the pressure was non-existent, specifically on the 69-yard touchdown to Will Pauling. Granted, they only sent 3, but I had it as like nearly 6 seconds that he was in the pocket back there, which allowed him to sit back, and they dropped 8. And, for some reason, I have no idea why, one of the linebackers just took off, like going after Braden Locke for some reason, and it opened up a huge hole in the zone, and Tretch found it, and it was off to the races and all that good stuff. He also gave his guys chances to make plays that I don't know we've seen, like whether it's overthrows or underthrows or not seeing a guy. I'm talking about in past games. This time he gave his guys chances to make plays. That second touchdown to Tretch, it was a good ball, but the catch was impressive. I mean, the catch was the story of that play, at least in my opinion. But there was just a ton of good from Braden Locke, and I think just more so than anything, his guys also made plays for him. And getting that thing to Vinny Anthony, nice throw, but Vinny Anthony just turns on the jets and goes. And those are the plays that, whether it was Tanner Mordecai last year or Tyler Van Dyke this year, or Braden Locke these last couple of games, it hasn't always been where a short pass not a short pass, but a somewhat short pass turns into a huge gain. And that's exactly what both of those throws, the one to Vinny and the one to Tretch, get the ball in your hands of your playmakers and let them go be athletes. That was Phil Longo's words to us when he first showed up. And yesterday, for one of the first times, I think we actually saw that.
It really showed the depth and the talent of this wide receiver group, which I feel like every preseason is something we've talked about for years, and then it just never materializes. The fact that you don't have Will Pauling, Bryson Green, Tyrell Henry goes down. Will came back for about a play or so, but all of them had lower body injuries. Bryson and Will were the two dudes. They showed it in the bowl game. We saw in preseason what they were going to be. And you lose them and you still roll. It really shows the way they've been able to kind of rebuild some of that wide receiver room. And one of the things Longo said in the preseason, why he felt so much more confidence in the wide receiver room, was the yak, really, because he said it was something that he thought in year one they didn't do a very good job of. If they would catch the ball and they would go down, and you've got to be able to do more than that. And obviously we saw that on those touchdown plays. And yeah, Braden had all the time in the world. That was a really strong performance from the offensive line, which deserves a ton of credit, because we've spent a lot of years talking about how the offensive line has not lived up to expectations. And when Braden has a clean pocket and he's not under duress, you can see what he's capable of doing. And obviously they were able to run block well enough to get to Wee Walker 3 touchdowns. I think of the touchdown pass to Vinny Anthony too, where Braden deserves a lot of credit, because he faked the handoff up the middle. He rolled to his right and he did enough. We don't expect him to be the most mobile quarterback, but he did enough for Vinny to get behind his guy in front of the other guy. And when you've got a guy that's won, I think, 3 state track titles in Kentucky, he did the rest the last 35 yards. But all the way around, just a really strong performance from this offense. And let's be honest, I know this team needed it, but I think Phil Longo needed it as well.
You could watch back the game this morning, and you could see like the smile on his face. I don't know that we've seen a ton of that this year, and the big high five he gives AJ Blazik. So yeah, he needed it. The team needed it. We heard that from Fickle. He said, they were acting like 13 and 14-year-olds in the locker room afterwards, celebrating it. Not like 13 or 14-year-olds, but just like, he said 13. What he means by that, obviously, is just off the charts excitement about a win that they desperately needed. Going back to the yards after catch, the stats have them as 210 of the 361 yards were after the catch. 93 from Tretch, 40, I think, 48 from Vinny Anthony. JT Seagreaves with his one catch had, got 20 yards on a 21-yard reception. So a lot of work being done after the catch. But yes, Braden Locke put the ball exactly where he needed to a lot in that second half. I'm thinking the throw down the middle down the hash to Darian Dupree in tight coverage. And it was a hell of a catch. And we'll talk about Darian, obviously, but it was a hell of a placement of a ball on third down and exactly right where it needed to be. And put it on him that he didn't really even have a choice. He had to catch it because it was just in the absolute perfect spot. So huge day for Braden Locke and much needed. The other guys that stood out with, Tretch. We have been wrong about a ton of things, a lot on this show. Well, I'm not going to include you that. I'll say I've been wrong about a lot of things on this show, a lot. Wasn't wrong about Tretch. You need to get the ball in his hands, and he needs it in some different ways. Even before Will Pauling went out, it felt like they were trying to get the ball into his hands and, maybe some different avenues, those the motions and getting the ball in his hand and letting him just be an athlete. And I thought that was very smart. And then obviously he was able to get free And I thought he showed incredible football intelligence in explaining exactly what he saw on his long 69-yard touchdown. Like, he was detailed about it. And then in his second touchdown, detailed in it, because it was, maybe we probably should have mentioned this with Braden Locke. It was an audible that they called. It was supposed to be a run play. They audible to a pass, and Tretch had to change up exactly what he wanted to do, and tight coverage, and still makes a huge play. Everything we saw yesterday is everything that I thought he could be. I'm not saying he's going to put up 139 yards receiving or whatever it was every single game, 134 yards receiving every single game, but you need the best players on your offense to touch the ball more than he had through the first 4 games. And I think that they made an effort to do it, and we saw it. Saw the result of it, I should say.
There are certain guys we've seen over the years in practice, and I think generally offensively, because it's easier to stand out on that side, where you go, whoa. And it doesn't always materialize. I think back to Aaron Cruikshank, but sometimes you see him early and they make plays. And while it didn't necessarily happen for Aaron as a wide receiver, we saw how good he was as a return man. I felt that way about Tretch, and certainly about Darian Dupree, who, again, we'll talk about when we get to the running backs. He's so shifty. He's so smooth. His cutting ability can just make dudes fall over. And we've been saying, get the ball in his hands, figure out a way to do it. He came in to the 5th game of the season with 4 receptions, and he'd only been targeted 10 times. That's not enough. Now, he's in a bit of a difficult spot because Will Pauling is the #1 slot receiver. But again, if you've got someone that dynamic, it's your job and your responsibility to figure out how to get him the ball. And I know there have been issues with hanging on to the ball or whatever it may be. There was the interception a week ago. I think it just kind of bounced off him. But the more chances you give someone like that, the more likelihood there is for those types of home runs. And what ended up happening, well, he had 6 catches for 134 yards, 2 touchdowns, and they targeted him 9 times. Obviously, some of that probably had to do with the fact that Will wasn't available. But like you talked about, they got him the ball in a couple times on those motions across the field just to see what he can do. And he's special, man. He really is.
He is. And I know when Will Pauling comes back, and I don't think Will Pauling is like out extended. He came back for that one play. He'll probably be a little sore, but I've never seen a guy go down with more serious looking injuries. I don't even know how serious this one looked, but he's gone down in practice a couple times. You're like, oh crap, I don't know that he's ever going to come back. And then he's back like 2 days later. He's a tough kid, played through that injury last year at Minnesota. He's going to be back, and he's going to be still a significant part of this offense. I think Braden Locke has a lot of trust in him and is going to continue to go his way. But I think you have to figure out a way to use both of those guys. And I know they play the same position, and sometimes you want to get 2 tight ends on the field, and that means, maybe you don't have a slot in there at all, or you have a tight end on the field and you can only have 1 slot in there. You have to find a way to get them on the field at the same time, not just simply when you go those 4 wide receiver packages. Maybe, I don't know, figure it out. That's what Phil Longo's paid to do. So figure it out. I thought also CJ Williams had to step up when those other guys go down. He had 4 catches for 60 yards. How many of them you think went for first downs, Jesse?
All 4.
All 4 of them did. Correct. Good job. A 19-yard catch, an 8-yard catch, a 5-yard catch, and a 28-yard catch. One of those included, I think it was on the first drive of the 3rd quarter, where he reached back with 1 arm to catch it. It was a hell of a throw. We never saw a replay of it, so I can't be positive that he just hauled it in with 1 arm. But he, again, is a guy that benefited from opportunities just like Tretch did.
Yeah. We've been waiting for this from CJ too. The amount of excitement with his arrival provided was off the charts. They just never get top 10 high school wide receivers, and it's taken a while. He did have the 50-yard touchdown catch earlier in the season, but had largely been quiet. But these are some of the things that I think we saw in practice. This is part of why Kenny Guyton was so excited in having him this year, that he talked about the difference between CJ on film a year ago to where he is now. And you do have to take advantage of those opportunities, and he certainly did. So
the big story coming into this game was obviously the Chez's departure that we learned about on Thursday. It was difficult to get a clear answer exactly on when this all came about. I know that Tawee Walker was asked about it a little bit, and was Chez there on Wednesday? He was. It was just, it was a little off. So either way, But that was the big story coming in, what was going to look like, because Luke Fickell had made clear that they wanted to give one or two guys a chance to get, some rhythm and some, get lathered up. And that's exactly what happened with Tawee Walker, right? He had 19 carries, he had 94 yards, and he had 3 touchdowns. And, it got towards the end of the game. His last touchdown and he said it himself, where Purdue was kind of just, I don't really want to tackle anymore. And the offensive line is a big part of that, but so is he.
He has shown that he can be the bell cow. We've talked since he got here about the combination of power and speed that he had in the size that he has, and he really showed it when he's healthy. He can be a 20 carry a guy for them. I think what's interesting, obviously, is what the rotation looked like after him. And we saw in warmups, Darian Dupree going with the 2s, and very clearly they wanted to get him into the mix. Now, his yards per carry average isn't particularly high, but he's also not gotten a ton of reps to say that he's, this is who he is, and that it's just a small sample size. But you can see the playmaking ability, and what makes him so special is how dynamic he is. You talked about the reception that he had from Braden. He had another one up the sideline where he was not down, kind of lost the ball. They called him down, but he's like I talked about Tretch. Darian was one of those guys too. You see it in practice, and you go, whoa, you got to figure out a way to get him on the field. So I don't expect it to be like a 50-50 split in the way that we felt like it would be with Tawee and Ches coming into the season, but they also don't need it to be a 50-50 split. You can get him in there in different ways, and he can help this offense and do something that really none of the other running backs have.
Well, he does have some pass catching skills, correct? Is that accurate? His hands are what?
They're certified, baby. You and I talked after interviews on Saturday that he may not say a lot, but he's going to give you something in the words that he says.
Yeah, when he spoke, he was great. Passing skills are really good. My hands are certified. And he also did and we'll talk about Dylan Jones here too, because he got his opportunity to come in after that. And I mean, if we're just talking about just straight, like, impressive runs and yards per carry and all that good stuff, Dylan Jones has been probably the most impressive running back when given opportunities. However, again, this is towards the end of the game with some of the Purdue really maybe not being totally invested. That said, his long run, the 47-yarder that he broke a tackle right at the line of scrimmage. There's some good vision to get out and then to go and use that speed too. So I thought he was extremely impressive. And again, I know that they don't want to use 4 or 5 guys, but wouldn't hate seeing more of Dylan Jones out there too. I think this is a good problem to have, obviously. And it's a problem that I think perhaps, just my opinion, that Ches Malusi may have seen a little bit, and that they wanted to get Darian Dupree more involved. And, even Cade Yakimelli had a hell of a run, one of the runs of the day with his 29-yard or his 30-yard touchdown on 4th and 1 out of the shotgun for a touchdown. But Purdue, I don't care. 4th and 1. They were perfect on 3rd and 4th and short yesterday, running out of the shotgun. It's a lot of, I don't really, again, as I said last week, I don't have a dog in the fight, really. I don't really care. It's just more so when there's just when people are so adamant about it, it has to be one way. You can get a yard in a bunch of different ways. It does. I think it's just really more so about execution and play calling that allows your guys to be put in a place to execute, which I think is probably has probably been a bigger issue than the actual plays and like the actual execution of it. Either way, just a little aside, got off track there a little bit. But Dylan Jones, loved what saw from him. Cade Yakimelli, Darian Dupree, and then obviously Tawee Walker, and even Gideon Tuka got in there, made his college debut in the final drive. It's a really young, but I think exciting room. And when you hear Luke Fickell, he's like, yeah, the future's pretty bright in there.
Very much so. If you think about the fact that this is Tawee's last year of eligibility, Darian and Dylan are the future at running back. We knew that before they even got here, based on how excited this staff was in landing those players, and they're showing why. I don't think they're going to have 4 running backs that they're going to use in games. Obviously, this is part of the plan that Luke wanted. Let's go with 2 and see what we can get out of them. But even those few opportunities for the young guys mean a whole lot, because they had what, half dozen, 7 guys that are true freshmen that ended up getting in on the last drive. And that's another thing Luke said. They were never really in a position where they could afford to do that at any previous point. And so that stuff matters, and it's going to matter for the future.
Yeah, they had, when I was watching the game back this morning, I just took a look on that final drive, and they had at various points, they had 7 true freshmen in. Maybe Matoyer, made his debut and completed his first pass. Kevin Haywood obviously got in there with Jack Nelson being dinged up, but Grant Steck made his debut. Ryan Corey made his debut. Emerson Mandel made his debut. And then you had Dylan Jones and Gideon Atuka, Gideon Atuka also made his debut. So yeah, that's what these other great things are about blowing the team out. You can get some of these young guys in. And I love the rule of being able to play in 4 games and not losing your red shirt. I think that's just significant for your ability to plan for, the following year. So it used to be like you would take those true freshmen that, were going to redshirt, but, you wanted them to get that experience. You would just take them for a road game, and they would just get to suit up, but they wouldn't actually get to play. And the ability to get to play here is, I think, significant for them, and it will be going down the line. We went about almost 22 minutes here. Have not mentioned the defense at all. I don't know that you would sit there and say this guy, there was a huge standout performance from this guy and a huge standout performance from that guy. But when you look at the scoreboard, scored 6 points. They got held out of the end zone. And I thought their 2 best moments as a defense came the only 2 times that Purdue truly, truly challenged them, that, came after the first interception or was the second interception. Either way, twice they got down inside the 10-yard line, and twice the Wisconsin defense repelled them. And when you go back and look at it, I thought Jaheim Thomas had a horrible game against USC. I think anybody that watched that game against USC was bad. Came up huge on that first possession on that one. And then the defensive line made plays on the second one. So those were 2 significant drives. I still don't know why Ryan Walter didn't go for it on 4th down. Your defense. I mean, I guess at that time, Wisconsin was not necessarily like having a ton of success offensively, but you're a bad team. You're a bad team. You got to play it a little bit differently, and he didn't play it differently. And I thought he played it scared, and it led to 2 field goals, and that was all they got.
Much like we're saying this is the best performance we've seen from the offense this season, I feel the same way about the defense, and those 2 drives at the goal line said it all, really set the tone. There was the first one, they were at the 3-yard line. They gave the ball to Devin Mockabee, and I think Hunter Wohler came up and stuffed him for no gain, and Purdue had to settle for a field goal. Mockabee, as a freshman 2 years ago, ran for more than 100 yards.
Tore him up.
Wisconsin was one of those guys that you're thinking, oh God, you got to see him every year. And this defense just did a great job. And of course, the second time, like you're talking about, they had to settle for the field goal. Jake Chaney comes in and gets a huge stuff on the first play. When I think it's like 1st and goal from the 4. And that's a 1-yard.
Go back and look at that play. It was the defensive lineman shoving his guy right back into, it was a Mockabee or whoever the running back was, forced him out, which allowed Jake Chaney to come through and take care of him. That's why I was mentioning the defensive line for that particular portion of the drive there.
Yeah, but then I believe it was Elijah Hills and Kurt Neal were credited with hurries on the subsequent plays and forced incompletions. And obviously then Purdue decided to kick the field goal, and they never scored again. Wisconsin was able to go down and score a touchdown despite what seemed in the moment like some questionable clock management. They obviously pulled it off and got the touchdown, take the 21-6 lead. And the game is effectively over. But the defense, again, deserves a lot of credit for coming up big when it mattered most. And this was, look, if it's going to be a big step for Phil Longo, even if it is against a bad team, I feel the same way about Mike Tressel and what he was able to do. Maybe they found a few things. They got some TFLs. They got some sacks. They got some hurries, pass breakups, everything. You saw what Christian Allegro can do. Nearly intercepted a pass on 2 separate occasions on the same play. So they've got some playmakers there. And John Pius showed up, he hadn't had any TFLs in the first 4 games. You could go down the list of guys who made plays, and that's an encouraging sign.
Sebastian Cheeks getting some opportunities. I think that he replaced Jaheim Thomas on the edge in some of their 3rd and long packages that we had seen. Jaheim Thomas on the edge. It's kind of where he jumped off sides both times last week against USC, was in those 3rd down situations. So he comes in and he has a sack and a half, the first of his career. It was Ben Barton that shoved his guy back into the running back on that 1st down that allowed that then Jake Chaney came through and obviously cleaned up very, very well. Kamoi Latu forcing a fumble as a guy was trying to change hands in tight quarters. That's just a horrible football team. That's just the piss poor, horrible football team. And that's, yeah. And we'll get into that when we answer some of these fan questions for sure. But yeah, the defensive line, the linebackers, Leon Lowry provided some pressure as well on a couple of those throws. Hudson Card is an absolute beast, just in terms of being able to extend the play. I mean, I think he had like 9 seconds one time because he was just running around like a chicken with its head cut off, and Wisconsin couldn't get to him. Like he damaged them last year on the ground. I think he had like 40 some odd yards. He ran around a lot yesterday, but I don't think he was nearly as impactful in gaining some yards on it. But that's a very bad team, and Wisconsin hasn't always done that to teams the last few years, made bad teams look bad. They usually sometimes are playing down to them, and that did not happen on Saturday, especially after halftime. So 216 yards is what Purdue ended up with, which was the fewest allowed by since in the Luke Fickell era, which is good. Another positive. Anything else you got? Atticus Bertram's still good.
Atticus Bertram's with the uncatchable punt. It has apparently magic right around the ball. It's a force field that prevents the opposing punt returner from actually catching the ball. I don't know how this is possible. In 5 games, there have now been 3 muffs that Wisconsin has been able to take advantage of and score on. But credit to him. He boomed the 52-yarder. He's putting the other guy in a bad spot. And he's made, if you want to say one guy has made the most strides from last year, I know we've heard a lot of things about like Nazir Forkurine and all that. Atticus Bertram's, man, kind of felt last year there were times where he was a liability, and now he is one of the MVPs of the team.
I mean, he's definitely up there. Someone tweeted at me saying that he was sitting in the student section. He could see the knuckleball that he kicks, and he's left-footed. So I think the sun may have played a role in a couple of those, and maybe in both those yesterday, because then Vinny Anthony put one on the ground as well in the was that the 3rd quarter. So maybe the sun was a little bit to blame for it, but that's 3 games. That's 3 of them, or that's 4 of them actually in 5 games. And you mentioned that they recovered 3 of them. So yeah, it's not ideal. Not ideal if you're the opposing punt returner when you're facing Atticus Bertram. So that was all that went right in week 6. Let's talk about perhaps some of the stuff that did not go right in week 6. And I don't know if you can tell or not that is the it's kind of essentially a red cross. It's like an injury. It's like an injury logo. Because I think that is honestly probably the closest, like that may be the most concerning thing is the injuries that Wisconsin sustained. Bryson Green and Will Pauling and Tyrell Henry losing 3 wide receivers like that. Jack Nelson's hip, but it sounded like he was fine. And did you talk to him yesterday?
No, I didn't.
Did you stay around and talk to him? I saw this quote from Colton Bartholomew that he was like, asked about the running game, and he was like, yeah, we just got to stick it. We got a lot of big guys. It's not like it's not like it's the 1985 Bears. It's fucking Purdue. So yeah. I mean, he can say that. It's the last time he's going to play Purdue, but it is. It's not like they were some great defense and they rolled right through them. But injury-wise, not ideal that to lose, especially what you could consider going into this game, your top 2 wide receivers.
Yeah, obviously their availability to be determined. We'll learn more this week and see whether those are some long-term situations. But we've talked a lot about Will and Bryson and what their playmaking ability is, and Tyrell Henry getting his opportunity. It means you've got to continue to go down the depth chart. We saw Quincy Burrows getting some snaps. Obviously, we talked about CJ Williams getting more reps, Vinny Anthony. They've got a really good group there, but the last thing you want to have is injuries at key positions stockpiling when you're about to go into the heart of your Big Ten schedule.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know that any of those injuries, especially to the ones to Bryson Green and to Will Pauling, are going to be things that are going to keep them out extended time. Bryson Green stayed on the sideline at least through halftime. I don't know if he was in street clothes after halftime or not. Will Pauling was in uniform the entire time. So we'll see. As I said before, I think Will Pauling's got just amazing healing powers. So I feel like it's not going to be something that he's going to be out for too long. The 2 interceptions that Braden Locke threw, the first one, Will Pauling should have caught the ball. And let's just call it what it is. It was luck that it rolled on his back, and then, the guy is able to hold on to it. That one is what it is. The second one, just a bad throw behind a guy, and the coverage was tight. And if it wasn't going to be a perfect throw, it was going to be a problem. And that's exactly what it was.
Purdue's defensive back came up with both picks, and I certainly can't fault Locke on the first one. You could not do that if you had 10 more times. Like, the ball literally rolled off Will's back, and the DB came in and somehow caught the ball before it hit the ground. But the second one is just a throw you can't make. DB made a good play, but Braden didn't put the wide receiver in a good enough position to be able to catch it. And, of course, Wisconsin's defense was able to hold. But it's just one of those where, like when we were talking last week about USC, man, you want to talk about the good things they did in the first half, but they sucked in the second half, and you can't ignore that. And it's the flip here. It's okay, well, Braden had a couple moments where things weren't looking great. His completion percentage was under 50. He had a couple interceptions, but the way that he was able to just release that from his mind and play the best half of football in the second half makes it much more forgivable, what happened early on.
Yeah, it certainly does. What am I looking for here? Yeah. Anything else that's stood out for you negatively? I thought maybe in the first half a little bit, trying to hold the edge against the run wasn't great, but I mean, we're nitpicking here at this point.
Yeah, there really isn't a ton, and there shouldn't be a ton when you win a game 52-6. There was maybe a stretch there in the first half where you're thinking, this game feels too close, but they shut the door quickly enough, and then it was over.
It was. So, all right, let's get into some of our questions from Twitter or whatever, if I can find them. Ryan asks, is any of this sustainable?
And that is the $1 million question. And I don't want to rain on anybody's parade, because you should be happy. And at the same time, I don't know. Like, every week I say this is an indictment on where your football program is at. And so you want to be able to celebrate a 52-6 win. And at the same time, how replicable is this against what you're going to face later? Now, they got to go on the road and play Rutgers. Rutgers just lost to Nebraska. It was a close game, 14-7. I think Scarlet Knights are early 2.5-point favorites. That's not going to be easy. Do I think Braden's going to be able to throw 350 plus yards? I wouldn't expect that to be the case, but I think maybe they found some things. Maybe there's at least confidence among the players that they can do more defensively. There are more playmakers and the same offensively. So I don't think you can extrapolate what happened and say this is what it's going to be, but maybe there are small pieces that you can take and use them moving forward.
Yeah, I think I would agree. There were some other ones in this similar type of thing. Samuel says, I feel like we can't take much from this win. Purdue looks awful, worse than South Dakota. If that's true, that's fine. Wisconsin was also in a 4-quarter game against South Dakota. This was not a fourth quarter game. They beat the piss out of them. So I don't know that we can take. If you want to compare the two, that's fine. But then you have to at least admit that Wisconsin is better than they were against South Dakota, right?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah. So again, Timmer says first half was pretty much the muff and blown coverage. Second half pass game was good, but the running was still bad until the fourth quarter. Love the blowout. Hope this sticks around. But is there a reason to believe we can continue the positives against a good team? And the thing is, you have to put those positives out there. You have to be able to show the ability to put the positives out there, and we haven't seen that this year. So for them to be able to do it and put a 52-3 win together, I don't know that that just happens. Even as bad as Purdue is, and they are, it doesn't just happen. You have to have improvement in areas to be able to make that, because if they were still playing the same way they did against South Dakota or against Western Michigan, then it would have been a much closer game, and we wouldn't be talking about we wouldn't be spending 25 minutes on positives and what went right.
You're exactly right about having to put it out there to show that you can actually do this. And if we want to spin it ahead, this 3-game stretch is so important for Wisconsin. They're sitting here now at 3-2. They're 1-1 in Big Ten play. It's not out of the realm of possibility for them to be 5-2. And maybe 4-3 is more realistic. I don't know, but these feel like the most winnable games right now on the schedule before you go into a exceptionally difficult 4-game stretch. And so to do this at this moment at least gives you some optimism that they can try and do that in the next couple of games.
Badger wants to know, is Wisconsin about to win the Big Ten?
No, sorry.
Fickle effect. Why were they holding out on us? The young guys of the future. Will they keep feeding them?
Well, Tretch needs the ball, and I think Darian is going to continue to get the ball. So it starts there. Beyond that, I mean, what other young guys are we really realistically talking about?
Why? Again, Fickle talked about it. You get opportunities in practice, and those opportunities then turn into opportunities in a game, right? You have to prove it you can do it in practice. I think Dylan Jones is another exciting guy that I would like to see more of, but I know that there's only so many carries to go around, and I know that there are probably people that are Cade Giacomelli fans that are like, what the hell is going on here? Because you look at his numbers and they are better than, average and all that good stuff, better than anybody else that's been getting carries in non-garbage time minutes. So it's tough to sit here and say that Dylan Jones should be getting more carries than Cade Giacomelli. Or even Darian Dupree, and certainly not Darian Dupree. This was another question. Why does everybody get so excited to see Darian Dupree, but not Dylan Jones?
Yeah. And that's fair. I think it's the playmaking ability that makes you go, wow, in a different way. And we saw it with some of the pass catching, but both of those guys fit this system and can be difference makers. They're just in a spot right now where if you want to pare down your rotation and Tawee Walker is going to be your bell cow, there's just not enough for 2 freshmen to be in the mix. So you have to pick one. And that's unfortunate for Dylan, but he's also obviously in the plans for the future, which is why he was one of those young guys who got in and he showed you what can make him so special. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it is interesting because from a strictly yards per carry perspective, it's not a high number for Darian. It's under 4 yards, but there are those moments where you see him juke somebody or you see him make that catch and you say, oh, that's the ceiling. And that's really special.
That dude wasn't down when he caught that pass. I mean, he spins off of those 2 guys. There's nobody behind them, but they call him down. Either way, this sticks with Dupree. Big Boss Man says they seem to feed Dupree between the tackles. Shouldn't they be trying to get him off the edge? He needs space.
I think they're trying to figure that out. Yes, I mean that's part of why he has success as a pass catcher is because you're getting him out in the open a little bit, and he can create some lanes. But I think he's got to be able to do both in this kind of offense too.
I don't know if you heard about this trend, Jesse. It's called the Tretchidine. Have you heard about that?
I have heard that. By the way, how can we be this deep into it and not have mentioned the fact that he shotgunned a beer in the form of a football, one of his many celebrations?
I was coming back to that. That's what
okay.
One of the questions was, is the Tretchidine upon us? And I don't know if it is upon us. I hope it is. But his sellies are top-notch already. He broke out 2 different memes in that one celly. He didn't talk about the second one, but he broke out 2 of them within the same one. And the shotgun, he says he doesn't drink, but he's seen it on TikTok. When I posted that and people heard, I don't know if you guys are on TikTok. I initially thought he said, I don't know if you guys know what TikTok is. Either way, both questions are like, you guys are old as hell. And I have to explain this whole social media thing to you. That's kind of what it felt like originally, but he explained exactly what it was, and broke open the beer, chugged that, and then did some other stuff going on that you can find on your local TikTok channel. No, are you on TikTok, Jesse?
No, because I'm old.
I'm old as well.
Maybe I should get on that. I don't know. And this is also because I'm old. The first time I ever heard Selly, I was listening to it back and I was like, what is he talking about? Oh, a celebration. Yeah. I was like, it's a selfie? But I'm old, man. It happens
I'm
to
old.
all.
I'm old as hell. However, the pandemic turned me into a person that is on TikTok, but it's not me that's on TikTok. My dogs are on TikTok. So,
okay.
Because nobody gives about me, but cute dogs, that works. But yeah, I never was on TikTok before 2020 and spent way too much time that year and probably the year after when we were all not doing anything on TikTok. Either way. A few more here. Is Braden Locke an average quarterback? And before you answer that, I have another one here. Perfect get-right game. I don't know if Locke is the future at quarterback, but if you give him time and weapons, he can be successful in this system.
I think he is more than an average quarterback. I think we have seen a lot of opponents that have average to bad quarterback play. But again, to be a prisoner of the moment, I'm reflecting on this after watching what he did in the second half. So the 50% completion rate would indicate pretty average, but I think there's a higher ceiling on that. And I'm also not willing to so what? He started 5 games now, I think, in his college career. Willing to give him more time, maybe the next 7 regular season games before making that declaration. You can't deny what he did in that second half.
I think what he did in the second half was very, very good. I also think it came under the most
friendly situation,
favorable quarterback situation that I can remember a Wisconsin quarterback having against a Big Ten team, where he was able to sit back there and pick guys apart. And I thought the first throw to Tretch really got him going. The first touchdown to Tretch really got him going, like mentally. But he also went the wrong way on a play early in the game, and there were a couple of mental errors here and there, and that's not his game. We hear so much about how smart he is and how good of a football mind he has, and I believe those things. But the conditions were very favorable, and I think while you're being a prisoner of the moment, I feel like I'm going to try and hold myself back from that, because we do have all that other evidence against good teams that leaves a little bit more to be desired. And so if he can do this against good teams, and if this offense can produce against good teams, well, then I think you can sit there and say, yes, he's an above average quarterback. But against good teams, he's and the offense have not been good enough. And no. Purdue, this goes to another question, is Purdue the worst Power 4 team in the country? And I think you can make a definite argument that they are at this point. So you have to do it. You have to go out there and produce, but I don't want to jump to conclusions based on Saturday, because we have other stuff that tells us, let's just wait and see.
Yeah, I get it. And that's kind of what I'm saying too. Like, if you consider the fact that by the end of this regular season, like this stretch of 8 weeks or 9 weeks, he'll start more games than he has in his career to date. And so we can put those together. And after that time period, when you've got more than a full season's worth of starts, I think you can really say what it is. Because yes, last year the circumstances were challenging. Early this season they've been challenging, but there's no excuses at this point. You get all the 1 reps. You're the guy for 2+ months, and you're going to have a chance to show whether you can do it when you have all that time against the likes of Penn State, Oregon, even Iowa, which got torched by Ohio State, but at least generally has a good defense, or at least does against Wisconsin. So I think we'll know a heck of a lot more by the end of November.
The best all-around Badger game since
Braden Locke's performance?
No, team performance, all-around performance.
Oh man.
I looked it up a little bit. Like, I might say the last time they scored 40+. Go back to that Northwestern game,
2022. Yeah.
The week after Paul Chryst got fired, they went out there and absolutely diced up Northwestern 42-7. They threw for 300 some odd yards. They threw 6 touchdowns. They had close to 200 yards rushing. It was a dominant performance on both sides of the ball. Just looking at the stats from that game. I mean, 21 to 30, 322 yards, 6 touchdowns, throwing the ball, 193 yards rushing, as I said. They had 26 first downs, and, Northwestern was not good that day. Though they did, apparently they did put up some points. They also turned the ball over 3 times that day. So I would say that probably was, if you want to go further back, maybe 2021 against Rutgers, where they beat them 52-3. But this was up there. This is up there.
Beat New Mexico State 66-7, right?
Against I'm saying against a worthwhile opponent. Do you know that? I do. You do know this. Did you know the name? I didn't know the name when he was playing.
Nope.
Yeah. So obviously yesterday the big upset was Alabama going into Vanderbilt and losing 40-35. The quarterback for Vanderbilt is Diego Pavia, and he was the New Mexico State quarterback when they played Wisconsin back in 2022, and it was a 66-7 game, and it may have been the worst performance by a visiting team that I can ever remember. It was horrible, and he wasn't very good. He was like 6-19 for 52 yards and interception. It was just a really, really bad team, and Wisconsin put together a full performance. But I pointed that out because he has come a long way. Like that New Mexico State team actually ended up being good. They went and won a bowl game, and then he ends up at Vanderbilt a couple years later, beats Auburn last year, and now goes and beats Alabama. The trajectory of his career from being a lowly, New Mexico State all the way up to what he did on Saturday, just absolutely incredible. And I think some people took it as me taking a shot at him, which was not. I just think it's an amazing how far has he come story. And there was a little Wisconsin connection to it, but got a lot of people upset with that. So it's Twitter. What are you going to do? You just mute the conversation and move on, which is exactly what I did. And I think that's it for the questions. I don't really. There's one more question here. I don't really want to talk about it, but maybe I'll throw it out here. Did the play of Michigan and Wisconsin affect USC last night?
Oh, wow. Like
those 2 games and how beat up they got going into Minnesota and maybe not being able to finish because they were ahead in the fourth quarter, just couldn't finish a fourth quarter game. I think I'm going to say that instead of that win going to PJ Fleck, I kind of feel like it should go to Luke Fickell and to what's his name at Michigan, the former offensive coordinator. What's his name? Do you remember? Sherrone Moore. I think both of those. I think that win last night should go to both of them instead of PJ Fleck. Though it gave us a great gif, him screaming his head off at an official in his face. I don't know how the official held himself back from just reaching back and just slugging him. But either way, that's it's neither here nor there. We'll move on. Wisconsin will get ready now, head to Rutgers. The Scarlet Knights, as you mentioned, losers for the first time this year down at Nebraska. Their defense is going to keep minimum. They have one of the best running backs in the country, certainly in the Big Ten, and it's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a tough game. It was a very tight game last year until Ricardo Hallman's pick 6 at the end of the first half, and Wisconsin was able to kind of get a little separation there. But I think it's going to be a tough game. And as you mentioned, they are underdogs in this game. Can you name the Big Ten teams that Wisconsin's been an underdog to since 2019?
Good teams.
Ohio State.
Yes.
Iowa. State. Nope. They only played Penn State
once. In 2021?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Ohio State, Iowa, USC, and now Rutgers. One of those is not like the others. You know that old Sesame Street song? One of these is not like the other. Rutgers is not like the other. But we'll see. Good team, and it's going to be a tough game for them out in Piscataway. Thankfully not going. All right. Thanks, Jesse.
Thanks, Zach.
All right. There he is, Jesse Temple from The Athletic. You've been listening to The Camp.